Is it?
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, good morning to everyone. I know it's a very odd hour for most of you. It's odd for me as well because it's about 6 in the morning here. Welcome to the to the inaugural NPI Global Youth Policy Dialogue Series. We've sort of termed it as Youth and Contemporary Public Policy Issues in Nepal. My name is Gambhir Bhatta. I'm the Executive Director of the Nepal Policy Institute. And again, apologies for the lateness for those that are in Asia in particular, because it is indeed an odd hour. Look, this is the first of such a series that we're planning to do. And we sort of made it to be more as a conversation, very organic in nature, and rather free-flowing, which is why you'll note we don't have any formal presentations from anyone, which is probably the right way to do these kinds of things. So here's how we'll progress. I'll first briefly introduce the 8 panelists that we have today with us over here, take you through some of the housekeeping rules, and then request Mr. Khagendra Tagal, who's the chairperson of the NPI Board of Directors, to say a few words by way of giving us a context of the dialogue series, and then we'll start the conversation. First, and I'm going through this alphabetically so that there's no hint of any bias. Mr. Ashish Adhikari is a graduate in international relations and diplomacy and pursuing doctoral studies in theoretical economics at Peking University. He's also a faculty of international relations at Kathmandu School of Law. Second, we have Ms. Akriti Ghimire, who's a journalist at the Kathmandu Post covering social affairs. And earlier this year, she graduated cum laude from the NYU Abu Dhabi campus with a degree in legal studies. We also have with us Mr. Avinash Jha, who's currently engagement manager at the Nepal Policy Institute and an education director of the nonprofit entity United World Schools. He's recently graduated at the top of his MPPM class at Kathmandu University School of Management, and he's also a member of the Global Shapers Community and the initiative of the World Economic Forum. Moving right along, we have Ms. Susanna Lama, who's currently a PhD researcher at Vrije University at Amsterdam. Among her prior experiences during her master's degree, she interned at the Royal Netherlands Meteorological Institute for 6 months. Ms. Nirupama Magar is next, who is a sophomore at Harvard, studying environmental science and public policy, mixed with mathematics and economics. We also have with us Ms. Isha Mandal, who has an academic background in political science, European policy, and international business, currently pursuing her second master's degree in human rights and democratization at the Global Campus of Human Rights in Venice, Italy. She has been part of research projects with UNIDO, UN Youth-Led Solutions, among others. The 7th panelist, Ms. Rojina Shrestha, is a recent MBA graduate from the School of Management at the Asian Institute of Technology in Thailand, and is also a national pageant winner of Miss Nepal Earth 2017. She's currently working as a Chief Customer Experience Analyst at Tamil Remote. And finally, Mr. Sushant Subedi is a policy analyst by training and practices at Invest Infra. He holds a bachelor's degree in international social and public policy from LSE in the UK. Now, in the interest of transparency, I should let you know that prior to the session, we shared with the panelists 3 questions for them to mull over. And this is it'll be in a particular order, but it will not be directed at all of them. As I said, it's a free-flowing conversation. So we meet it more as picking up threads of, gems of information that might come up and have a conversation around that. The first question was around what they think is the most pressing public policy issue in Nepal and how would they address it. So it's a pretty high level question, but something that I hope will get us started. The second question was around what they think Nepal expects of them, and is that a fair expectation? Long time ago, when Barack Obama had visited India, he had talked to college students in Mumbai, and it actually asked this question of the group: what does India expect of them, and is that a fair expectation? So I thought we should include that here as well. And finally, just to help us out as well, how do they think NPI can better manage to engage the youths of Nepal? Three housekeeping rules. Please put your mics on mute unless you have the floor. That makes it easier for all of us to have a conversation. Please post any questions or comments in the chat box, which we'll be reviewing regularly, or raise your hand if you have a query. And while I'll carry out the moderation tasks in English, Nepali is perfectly okay. If you're comfortable with that, I presume all of us understand Nepali as well, but if you don't mind, I'll continue to speak in English. Having said all that, let me request Mr. Kagnatakal for some opening remarks and to help us put this event in perspective. So, Ragal, over to
you. Thank you, Gambirji. First of all, I would like to welcome all of you to this Global Youth Policy Dialogue series. And despite of odd hours, you managed to give your support, solidarity to our special, vibrant youths. This, I should say, tonight here, but different time zones. It's morning and evening. So when we say it's a global youth policy dialogue, basically we look at the Nepali youth, and Nepal's population is mostly young, and we call 16 to 14 years age group youth. So this is great demographic window of opportunity for the economic development. Many countries, including the country that I stay in, Thailand, they made significant economic progress securing this demographic dividend. FADESH, even United Nations National Planning Commission, they have also responded to this potential and then devised many tools and incentives. For example, after the promulgation of 2015 Constitution, we have National Youth Act, and there is a Youth Vision 2025 formulated. However, I went through a recent survey by Niti Aayog that says, actually that was a survey of only 2,000 youth across the country, and then they reported there's a hopeless widespread across most youth between 18 to 40 age group. So that means that population, that age group, was the 50% voters in 2017 federal and provincial election, and the frustration in that special, very important block of Nepalese population is something that we need to pay attention to. So that means it doesn't mean that the government of Nepal hasn't done anything on that. There are many initiatives and intents. However, in the policy cycle, in the different phases where we went wrong or where we are failing is something we need to look at the present time. So to understand the problem of youth, I think we need to know the dynamics of Nepali youth first. For me, when I was preparing to give this opening remark just a few minutes ago, and then I was analyzing the youth demography, so I can group them into three categories actually. First is Nepal-based youth. These are regular youth going to university, doing regular work, or some of them are unemployed. And another group of Nepali youth could be youth engaged in foreign labor market. That means the migrant workers. And I think that's the largest segment of youth population in Nepal. And if you count the population, the migrant workers in India also, it could be 7 to 8 millions together with other parts of the world. And the third component, the third segment of the Nepali youth is Nepalese youth studying in several foreign universities. I think the third one consists of 500,000 Nepali students approximately. As you see our panelists tonight that Gambhirji just introduced, so they represent several universities, including one from Kathmandu University, and also with the Nepal Policy Institute. So what we're trying to do here is this constituency, the 500,000 Nepali students, and it hasn't been really discussed and debated what is the potential of these young people and studying in different universities. Actually, they are the potential to contribute to knowledge economy. So the first category of Nepalese youth, they are contributing to social and political change of Nepal, running the regular economy, working in different formal and informal sector. The second category, that's a huge contribution they are making, like 30% of the national GDP they have been contributing. So this population, these young students, youth studying abroad, actually the knowledge remittance or whatever we call it, there is a huge potential and the number is growing. So this is the constituency NPI is trying to tap out of this particular event. It doesn't mean that we ignore other two components. Those other two categories we are already working for in different ways. But this one, they could be the source of knowledge. That's why in a conventional way, they could be called brain drain. But in the 21st century, the notion of brain drain doesn't really work just because they're out of the country. But if we could connect them back to the interest of country, still we gain the brain. So with that conviction, we have devised this youth policy dialogue. And particularly out of this, we plan to achieve three things. The first one, to create a global community of Nepali youth studying in different universities and connect them to the interests of Nepal. The second one is to look at policy issues from interdisciplinary and intergenerational approach. And the third one is to learn youth perspectives on how NPI can be a complementary platform for Nepali youth to pursue their academic and career development dream while keeping their interest to Nepal intact. So basically, with these objectives, we are organizing this particular event pretty broad because it's an inaugural event, and we would like to learn from these vibrant youths and shape these events and plan more topical and focused discussion in the subsequent series. So that's what the idea behind this event. And to conclude, NPI would like to offer a seat for youth at the table when we discuss policy ideas, issues, and the possible solution. So that's I think this policy dialogue forum today is the beginning of that. So with that, I would like to conclude my remark and give the stage back to Gambhirji. Over to you, Gambhirji.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gambhirji. That was really nice. I like the way you sort of encapsulated the three objectives of this particular session. Now, look, so it's we're now about 18 minutes into this session. Let me throw out the first question, and it's probably, as I said, it's meant as an overarching question, and everybody should feel free to take a look at it from any angle that you would like to do so. First question around what you think is the most pressing public policy issue in Nepal, and I'm sorry to do this to you, Mr. Adhikari, Adhikari, but let me start off with you, because last night I think it was when I sort of went through a particular YouTube video clip of you talking about the MCC issues in Nepal, and I thought, hang on a minute, there might be some issues right over there for you to latch on to. So, really quickly, in your view of whatever you've seen and what's happening in Nepal, what is the most pressing public policy issue?
Thank you, Gambhir sir, and thank you for this opportunity. I would like to, first of all, I was a bit confused when I saw that question. I was a bit confused because I thought whether it is intended for us to speak on a specific area, or whether it was to get our viewpoints on a generic, on a superficial term. So I would like to stick on a generic point of view.
Sure.
In this question for now. So first of all, I would like to present one or two distinct things that I would rather say experienced as well, because I worked with Policy Research Institute for a certain period of time. It's a government think tank that they opened to study policy and prescribe certain policies to the government in 2075 years, I guess it was formed in 2025. So it's not only a study what I saw, but it's also some kind of experience that I got working with PRI, Policy Research Institute. The first thing that I would like to highlight is, as I see it, I don't see any issues on the formation of agenda in Nepal. The newspapers are everywhere, the social media is there, and there are some places like Maiti Ghar where people can go and show their play cards. So agenda setting, I think it's not a big issue right now as it used to be before 10 years or before two decades. So the point that I'm trying to make over here is I see a bit restraint in the area of bureaucracy, because if we watch a bit deeper, the institution that is the major stakeholder of policy making and policy formulation in Nepal since a long period of time is bureaucracy. And there are certain peculiar characteristics of bureaucracy that we can see all over the world. And one of the major characteristics is status quo. They don't like changes. They just like to continue whatever they are doing. So, I think one major issue that the field of policy studies in Nepal is that we are not able to catch the changes of society that's happening so fast. Because the major stakeholder of policy formulation in Nepal is bureaucracy, and it has these peculiar characteristics of status quo.
Okay.
And
sorry, can I stop you over there then, Mr. Adhikari? Sorry, this is a really good point, because I know you've actually latched onto something that could potentially just have us speaking for the next several hours on this particular issue. I'll come back to you if you don't mind. Sorry, but I don't mean to cut you short and everything, but because we do have other panelists to get back. But I'd like to come back to you later on with respect to what is it that we can then do about how to get the bureaucracy to get away from the status quo perspective. But that's a really good point. Susan Ajay, Susan, let me pass it on to you to say, is there a sense from whatever you've been able to look at in Nepal that the bureaucracy is indeed one of the main constraints to public policy formulation, public policy implementation, and so on in Nepal?
Thank you, Gambhirji. म चाहिँ नेपालीमै बोल्छु. मलाई चाहिँ जहाँसम्म लाग्छ पब्लिक पोलिसीहरू बनाउँदाखेरि चाहिँ नेपालमा पब्लिक पोलिसीको कुरा गर्दा चाहिँ एकदमै राम्रो पोलिसीहरू छ जुन चाहिँ इम्प्लिमेन्टेसन गर्न चाहिँ एकदमै प्रब्लम, त्यो इम्प्लिमेन्ट गर्न चाहिँ प्रब्लम छ. त्यो एउटा चाहिँ ब्युरोक्रेसीको पनि समहाउ त्यहाँ देखिन्छ, इन्फ्लुएन्स हुन्छ नि, चेन्जेसहरू लिएर आउन एकदमै अप्ठ्यारो हुने. अनि त्यो ग्याप चाहिँ छ कि बटम अप अप्रोच भन्दा पनि टप डाउन अप्रोच चाहिँ धेरै देखिन्छ. अनि त्यो ग्याप धेरै भएको भएर चाहिँ इम्प्लिमेन्टेसन गर्न गाह्रो हुने भएको भएर चाहिँ जो पब्लिक पोलिसीहरू त छ तर इम्प्लिमेन्टेसनमा चाहिँ प्रब्लम्सहरू चाहिँ देख्छु म चाहिँ. अनि फेरि मेरो फिल्ड चाहिँ त्यति साह्रो पब्लिक पोलिसीतिर नभएको भएर म चाहिँ सिर्फ रिसर्चतिर मेनली भएको भएर मेरो सेक्टर वाइज मेरो एक्सपर्टिजमा हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ मैले आफूले हेर्दाखेरि चाहिँ त्यही हो, तल ग्राउन्ड लेभलमा रिसर्च छैन, सिधै माथिबाट अरूले जे गर्यो त्यही वाला कपी गरेको मात्रै धेरै देखिन्छ. त्यो चाहिँ मलाई एकदमै चित्त बुझ्दैन नेपालको केसमा चाहिँ.
Okay, thank you. That's a valid point. And actually, those of us that have looked at what's happening in Nepal, as in did other countries, because the bureaucracy being an issue is not necessarily just something that can be seen in Nepal. Rojinaji, let me pass it on to you now. So we've heard two things so far: the fact about the bureaucracy being one of the elements of the constraint, and the gap between policy and its implementation being the second. Is that, let me hear your thoughts about this, or on either of this topic or any other issue that you think is relevant in Nepal right now.
I second that my fellow speakers, Mr. Ashishji and Srijanaji, but I would like to mention something else, what I've prepared for this dialogue. Firstly, presenting my gratefulness towards Nepal Policy Institute for having me in this dialogue as a youth representative, along with my fellow speakers. But moving on straight to the point of the unyielding public policy problem that we see in Nepal, I would like to mention particularly about women entrepreneurs in Nepal. We have been hearing that like women entrepreneurs, they own nearly 1/3 of Nepal's business as per the report of Nepal Bureau of Statistics. And according to Nepalese law enacted in 2011, if a business is registered solely owned by a woman, can receive 20% discount for patents and other intellectual property rights, 35% discount off the registration fee, and many more. And all these new subsidies and tax waivers for women entrepreneurs aim to glorify the working field for women-owned businesses, and also policymakers hope that this waiver will boost the nation's economy while women entrepreneurs see potential benefits. But you all might be thinking, where lies the problem in this policy, right? Have you ever thought who is actually controlling or running the business that have been registered in the name of a woman? Is it that woman herself? Is there anyone monitoring such loopholes? A trend has developed for registering businesses under women solely for the tax benefits. And this is continuing to increase as Nepal Enterprise Act of 2016 has been passed. Simultaneously, there is increase in promoting women entrepreneurship by offering rebates in registration, income tax, remunerations, income, and there is boom in effort of supporting agencies to empower women as entrepreneurs. However, the status of women has not changed as expected. The problem is not just limited to this, but what I feel like is the problem holds in another context where many women claim that they do not have enough time and resources to understand that they are unclear, and they feel change is so fast, and the these interpretations depend too much on the discretion of government officials they deal with. And one more context where I feel like this is a problem with the policy is that women in rural areas, they aren't aware about these policies at all to understand to even like a bit. So yeah, I would like to add, like, these are like, we have many policies and we have many policymakers, many youths are also involved, but I see like these are implemented, but also there are some loopholes, like these policies has been implemented but not utilized properly. So I just like to add on.
Thank you, Rosie. I think so. You've added a third element over here with respect to women entrepreneurs, but I guess it's as part of a larger picture of looking at gender issues. Now, let me bring in Isha Mandal to the picture, because you have, Ishaji, one of the 3 or 4 areas that you've been looking at is on gender studies. Give me your perspective on this particular point that Rosie has mentioned about women entrepreneurs and about the bigger picture of gender issues in Nepal.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So this thing that Rojina ji has brought up is a very crucial issue, and that very nicely ties into what I wanted to talk about. The aspect of political participation that we have in Nepal. Obviously, in a bigger picture, Nepal is ethnically diverse. It has a lot of diversity that we're all aware of. However, the thing is, does it happen in practice? And the thing that Rosina ji points out in terms of loopholes, that is what is being used to the maximum. So if you look at our parliamentary setting as well, we have the so-called quota system, which is always in some way implemented, but there is no forum to go beyond that, and that is very problematic. And then in that sense, we see how, in the name of democracy, in the name of making sure that things are being addressed, that things are going on, various fronts are shown from our government and from our private sector as well, but implementation is highly lacking, which I think was also brought up by Srijana ji. So when we look at the context of gender studies, I mean, we don't need to be very, we don't even need to look at the entrepreneurial section. Let's look at our household, for examples, the power dynamics in our own families, for instance. So, we see there is a lot of gender imbalance, and these imbalances are not just in the context of gender, but, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of religion, and then it goes on. And are there any mechanisms to hold people accountable? I think that is something we should definitely discuss in this upcoming forum. So I'll just say that.
Great, thank you, Isaji. Valid points, and I like the way you sort of brought it down to a more family level, where if you look at what's happening within a family context, and then expand from there to take a look at from a broader societal perspective. Akriti, you're covering social affairs for the Carpenter Post. Tell me about what you think about this particular issue, or anything else that you've seen which sort of needs to be highlighted.
Thank you so much, Gambhirji. And I think I'd like to tie into what Srijana ji said and what Isha ji said. And this ties into the gap that Srijana ji had identified. And I think I'd like to fill in with two things. Firstly is the lack of sense of ownership that the bureaucrats or the people in political parties that they feel. Any person that you go and talk to at various posts, they're simply doing their job without feeling any sort of ownership towards it or feeling responsible towards it. And the other thing is about the lack of awareness that Isha, you mentioned how women in rural areas don't. It's not just women in rural areas, even us youth, we don't know what our laws are. We don't know what constitutes, like, what are the things that we're protected by and what we're not. And this I tie into, I'll give one example of Section 47 of Electronic Transaction Act in Nepal, which covers online harassment. Now, what it specifically says is that anything that goes against the public morality and what is not considered decent will, and if that falls under it, and then only the Cyber Bureau is going to take your cases under cyber harassment. Now, the thing is that it is not victim-centric. And when you walk into Cyber Bureau, and you see how the inspectors there are interacting with victims who've come into there, survivors of harassment, it's horrendous. The sort of lack of respect, the lack of sensitivity that goes on in there. And these nuances are not captured in our laws. And this is the sort of sensitivity that is required. This is the sort of nuance that happens on day-to-day basis. And people don't know what constitutes harassment on one side, and they don't even know what the laws are. They don't even know what the procedure is. And even when they try and seek help from these mechanisms, the mechanisms are not, they're not built well enough. The Bureau neither does it have proper physical infrastructure, nor do they have the sensitivities. And about awareness, another simple example that I'll give is that Nepal has existing laws against open air burning. But open air burning is rampant all across. Like, my neighbor was burning it openly. I took a screenshot, sent it to my VDC chair, but nothing's going to happen. He saw the message and that's it. So there are laws, and these are people who can implement it, right? So it's honestly kind of annoying that you know the laws are there, and yet you, despite being in the position of power, you're not implementing. So that goes back to this lack of sense of ownership that I feel that these bureaucrats and everyone in Nepal feels. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Akriti. So a couple of things that I've sort of gathered from the discussion so far. And what I really like to do is to go back to Ashish at some point, and because one of the comments you see in the chat box here is about the need probably for training on policy implementation for bureaucrats, and maybe hopefully that will then take care of things. Sumidiji, given the studies that you'd had at LSE on international social and public policy, and given your current experiences, tell me a little bit about where in this scheme of things do you see the bureaucrats coming into the picture in order to be able to better address this particular problem? And right now we're talking largely about women entrepreneurship, gender issues, and so on, but feel free to expand that if you wish. Tell me a little bit about how you see this particular issue from your perspective.
Well, I think a lot of the speakers, they're taking a very political economic lens to the policies issues, and I do think that's reasonable. And I think when it comes to dealing with entrepreneurs here in Nepal, I think policymakers have to make sure that the public and private sector, they are not two sides of coin. They quite intersect a lot while you carry out, let's say, entrepreneurship or development activities. So I think bureaucrats, they should play more of a role of an enabler so that they can encourage the private sector to take up the initiatives. I think the speakers talk about a lot of the mismatch between what happens in policy and what actually takes place in practice, which I think is very reasonable. But I think before commenting on that issue, we need to be also be mindful that bureaucrats also have their responsibilities, and when it comes to dealing with private sector, they need to be a bit more mindful. And I think the better way to go through this would be more of a public-private collaboration rather than the blame game between the private sector and the public bureaucrats.
Okay, thank you. So another element added to this discussion on public-private partnership issues. So we'll come back again, although that might be a really important concept with respect to how you can have that applied in the implementation of policies strictly from a public sector perspective, but we'll come back to that. Nirupaji, I haven't forgotten about you, or Avinash as well, so I will come back to you on this one, but let me for now quickly revert to Ashishji. Ashishji, tell me a little bit about whether or not you think providing relevant policy implementation training and other such interventions might actually help the bureaucrats see the public policy from a different perspective.
See, how I look at it is, I think that the trainings, the soft institutions that we talk about, like training, capacity building, leadership skills, I think all of those have already been done and tested. If we go through the expenses that if you go through the expenses that the government has done, I think a lot of has already been done in but that the point that I was trying to make, Susanti just raised that. I was also trying to make the same point. It's a public-private partnership, but I was trying to put it in a different way. In the lens of economic studies, you can say it market. In the lens of sociology, you can say it ethnicities. In the lens of political science, you can say civil groups or something like that. But what I was trying to convey is, the whole authority, the state-centric approach of policy formulation and execution should be devoluted into different parts, different assemblies. That's how I see it. I would stop here for now, and I'll add something if something needs to be added later.
Great, thank you, Ashishji. Nirupaji, tell me a little bit about any of your views on any of these particular issues that we've talked about so far.
Thank you, Gambhirji. So I would like to touch upon ownership and responsibility that Akriti mentioned earlier. So there's very lack of ownership and responsibility among the bureaucrats, but I would also like to touch upon ownership and responsibility that the local people who are the beneficiaries of the public policy and the developmental works have towards the developmental work that's going on in their villages. So most of the developmental programs, the project that I see in my village, so what happens is an unknown engineer, engineer from the central or other parts of Nepal comes, and then he carries out the development works, and people do not know about anything of it. Like the local people are merely treated as the people who need to change their lifestyle according to the projects that are going on there, not as in. So they don't actually have ownership towards a project. So there's a bit of a disconnect between what is done in their land for them by other people and what their responsibility towards it is. So a lot of times I can see that the developmental works, some person comes and then they carry out the development works. And then, for example, the road construction or the bridge construction. And then what happens is that once the bridges are made and the roads are made, there's no one to take care of it. There's no one to look after, look at what's going on with the road, because sometimes there are landslides and other things and no one takes care of it. So there are several other problems in Nepal regarding the public policy, but I think the most important thing is that the people which we are trying to make well of, they're not actually owners of it. They're merely the beneficiaries. So once they've been given that development, I'm sorry, I'm a bit out of words, but so
Okay.
we
No,
are to
fair
look
enough.
at responsibility
Sorry,
and
go ahead. Yeah.
yeah, if we are to look at the responsibilities and ownership that bureaucrats they do not have, we also need to look at what's making the people not have interest in what's been happening in their land.
Okay, great. No, thank you. And I think there's a good examples of, where you see lack of ownership of the bureaucrats themselves. And look, we don't want to necessarily just latch onto the bureaucrats themselves as being a point of discontent over here, because as I said, if you look at developments around the world, you'll see that this is an issue that takes place elsewhere as well. Avinash, I will come to you finally for this particular round. In the chat box, Kesavji has actually talked about a very important point about the sort of the relationship that exists between bureaucrats and politicians, and there's a particular shape that it has taken in Nepal. Presumably it'll be in other places. Now, I've never worked as a bureaucrat before, so I can't really explain that to you. The closest was the role that I had as a senior advisor in the New Zealand government in the public service here, and clearly that's a different experience. And I have my own particular views about how bureaucracies ought to function vis-a-vis the politicians. But give me your views, Avinash, about either the role of the bureaucracy and the lack of ownership there, or either on the gap between policy and implementation, or on women entrepreneurship, gender issues, and other such things. So over to you.
Thank you for having me. So basically, regarding this public policy, what I see is like public policy is basically here to solve the problems of the people and also to make the society and the country prosperous. So basically, it links to the like how our economy is growing, and looking at like how policies works in Nepal, and then what are the lacks are like. Like normally, like Nepalese economy is a kind of like it's a result of like so many incoherent policies, and there is a lack of coordination in the policy formulation and then implementation. And then also whenever like we are formulating the policy, though during the policy formulation phase also there is a lack of effective there is no engagement of the multi-stakeholder mechanism, and also the participation of the relevant stakeholders, like who can be part of this the policy formulation process. And also the one thing I see is like there is also a kind of like weak intersectoral and interagency coordination kind of thing is also a problem. And then in addition to that, not only the bureaucracy, but the political instability and then governance, like the inefficiency of the bureaucracy, and on top of that, agenda setting. And then one important thing what I see is like also the lack of investment friendly bureaucracy is also a problem. And then finally, whenever like we are like as we are talking about this economy, like making the country prosperous, like financing choices, and then selection of project based on the priorities, also one few of the constraining factor that is affecting the overall like the growth of the country. And so basically what I would like to conclude that like conflicting and contradictory policies and the corruption induced in environment has basically like discouraged like both internal and foreign investment kind of thing. And this is what gap I see in case of like public policy in Nepal.
Okay, thank you, Avinash. Right, so let me come back to Ashish then, because in some ways you did start this really nice thread of conversation around bureaucrats. But as you'll see in the chat box again, including Nalini ji and the others have actually raised this point. The bureaucrats are not the only entity that are involved in policy implementation. There are many others. Can you sort of take us through both from an intellectual perspective, but also from a practical one, about the extent to which you can then sort of have a narrative around how it is that policy implementation takes place. Now, let's not talk about policy formulation, because that presumably there are systems in place in Nepal and elsewhere. And as you've said, the agenda setting itself is not necessarily a major issue in Nepal right now. But take it back to this narrative about where in the scheme of things do we then come and take as a point of entry looking at how to enhance policy implementation, because maybe that will then give us a sense of trying to find the space where we can come in and start talking about, policy reforms in Nepal. So tell me a little bit more about, if you were to expand it beyond bureaucracies, and also about where in this larger scheme of things do we sort of latch on to get something going. Over to you, Ashish.
Thank you, Gambhir sir. I see different groups that have been participating in policy formulation and even implementation in Nepal since long. Upabhokta Samuha, in Nepali they call it Upabhokta Samuha. I don't know how we literally translate it in English. They are an important stakeholder in policy formulation, and even not only formulation, since the phase of agenda setting, they are into the game, and they are also a strong stockholder in implementation, and even after implementation they monitor and even regulate those projects as well. So what I was trying to convey when I pulled bureaucracy into the discussion was that aspect of participation from these kind of smaller groups of society, that's very minimal, that's very small, and there is also a flavor of politicization as well in those groups as well. So what I was trying to convey was the scope of those participation should increase. May it be civil society, may it be those groups that I just discussed, and it should not enlarge in a cross-sectional way, but it should also devolve into local, into small entities. Like I would like to give you an example of my own ward, where my ward chairman, he told us to make a committee before a project of drinking water. So that's how small entities can come and work together vis-a-vis the centralized and closed Singadaba that we have. So that's where I was trying to bring the discussion into. And in my experience, I just named the institute as well when I spoke earlier, the Policy Research Institute. They have been given this task, and they discuss with the different stakeholders of the society, but still it's quite central, and it's in the upper tier of this hierarchy. So I think we have to bring it down. We have to devolve it to lower level, so that people could participate and they could give their opinions. So to summarize your question, my answer on the question, I think those groups should be the groups that we just that you just wanted to know would be those groups in a ward level, or the forums that they form, like the entrepreneurs forum, the business forum. Those could be different stakeholders in addition to bureaucracy. And one important component itself is the parliamentarians. We haven't heard much about laws prescribed by parliamentarians themselves into the parliament. They formulate laws, they formulate policies, they guide policies, but I haven't heard much about a parliamentarian coming up and filing his own a piece of paper as a law. Rather, it comes from ministries through a different kind of organization. That's
Okay.
what I was trying to say.
Thank you, Ashish. So again, but I mean, that particular point of how sort of laws come about, that's not really unique to Nepal. If you look at what's happening, how laws are framed in Japan, for example, it is indeed bureaucrats that get the initial paper to pen to paper in terms of getting things started. But there's another very interesting conversation that's taking place in the chat box of here. And again, Nalinji has raised this really valid point about the relationship between ownership and accountability, and why is it that ownership is more important? Susanjay, tell me a little bit again from your own perspectives of when you're looking at the issue of international social public policy. Is there? I know there's a link between ownership and accountability, but would you necessarily add greater weight to one versus the other?
Well, that's an interesting question in itself. And I think in the sense of ownership, I think the current move towards federalism, whereby a lot of power is trying to, I think a lot of the government power is trying to be decentralized through the local levels. I think it will bring some sense of ownership to the local people. किनभने नेपालीमै भन्नुपर्दा नेपालको स्थानीय तहहरूले पनि कतिपय अधिकारहरू अहिले पाइसकेको छ, त्यसले गर्दा चाहिँ त्यो ओनरशिपको लागि चाहिँ थोरै भए पनि हेल्प गर्छ होला भन्ने, द्याट्स माई पर्सनल ओपिनियन. अनि ओनरशिप र अकाउन्टेबिलिटीकोमा चुज गर्नको लागि, इफ आई ह्याड टु चुज, obviously I think I would choose accountability, because I think whenever it comes to development projects in these local levels, once whoever does the development project, they're accountable. It could be on the finance side, or it could be on the logistic side, the whole process. If the whole process is transparent and accountable, I think that's a better outcome than having a sense of ownership. But obviously ownership is equally important, because people have to know what's going on in their localities.
Yeah, no, that's a valid point. Thank you. For me personally, I think ownership enhances accountability. If a person believes, if a bureaucrat believes that he or she is actually, has a stake in this particular policy that's being passed down, then there's greater sense of wanting to do something about it, and therefore being held to account for the particular results in this area. Ashish, you wanted to say something about ownership and accountability. Go ahead.
Thank you, sir. यो अलिकति नेपालीमै भन्छु है, अलिक सहज हुन्छ. यो अनरशिप र एकाउन्टेबिलिटीको कुरा गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ आई थिङ्क वी सुड फर्स्ट आस्क कसको अनरशिप र कसलाई एकाउन्टेबल होइन. अब एउटा वडामा एउटा सानो बाटो बनाउँदाखेरि को प्रति एकाउन्टेबल हुनुपर्ने र कसको अनरशिप हुनुपर्ने हो कि त्यसमा. त्यसले गर्दाखेरि अल्टिमेटली पोलिसीका कुराहरूमा चाहिँ आई थिङ्क यो डिभोल्युसनको कुरा गरेपछि अनि अनरशिप र एकाउन्टेबिलिटीको कुरा आउँछ होला. झापाको एउटा बाटो बनाउनको लागि कैलालीको पोलिटिसियन अनरशिप उसको एकाउन्टेबिलिटी हुन पर्ने कि नपर्ने, कस्तो खालको स्ट्रक्चरमा चाहिँ उसको एकाउन्टेबिलिटी हुनुपर्ने र कस्तो खालको गभर्मेन्ट्सको स्ट्रक्चरमा चाहिँ उसको एकाउन्टेबिलिटी हुन नपर्ने, त्यो कुरा पनि जोडिएर आउँछ होला मेरो विचारमा यसमा चाहिँ. त्यति नै भन्न खोजेको.
Okay, thank you. No, that's a very valid point. Indeed, should a bureaucrat in Kailali necessarily be held accountable for, which brings us to the point that Neliji has been talking about over here. At the grassroots level, yeah, ownership makes complete sense, she says, and there can be no disagreement on that at all. Now, look, it's about 52 minutes past the hour. We've been talking about this one particular issue, and I know, Nirubamji, thank you for getting us started in this particular question about taking it down to a very local level and giving examples of what is it that that takes place at the local level, and how do you then expand what you see at the local level to this bigger issue of what's happening in the country. For me, the second question that I sort of posed to the group is just as interesting, because what I really wanted to get a sense, and this is all of us in this particular session right now, is to understand what is it that you think Nepal expects of you in the years to come. Now, clearly you have some expectations of the country, which is why you are studying whatever you're studying, or you've already finished your studies and are working in a particular area, and that's well and good. But do you think whatever Nepal expects of you is fair? Maybe there's a lot riding on your shoulders, and maybe you know about it, maybe you don't care, but that's something that I really want to hear. And I don't mean to be very flippant when I say maybe you don't care, because some of us, myself included, to be honest, long ago, 40 years ago, said, I really don't care. And I left. Is that something? So this is a really valid question. Let me start off with Nirupamji again, because, and I'm probably wrong in saying this, but it should be, you are younger than most of us. Tell me about when you're studying. You see whatever you see in Nepal, you read about it, and I'm sure you have career aspirations. Tell me about whether or not, A, what do you think Nepal expects of you? And B, is that a fair expectation?
Yeah, actually, I had a very long debate with my friends about our obligations towards a land bounded by some political boundaries. Like, if we think about politically, it makes sense, but if we think about it in a philosophical level, then a country does not make sense. Like, well, we had a very long conversation about it, but yeah, first of all, I would need to think about what this country means to me, because I mean, we all means to me, like what it has given to me, what opportunities I may have going there. But certainly my plans after college is to spend a few years here and then go back to Nepal and work in environmental sector, probably in the AC mode. There's a Indian subcontinent organization that's working with the environmental projects in Nepal. But I certainly don't know what the country expects of me, because that's a very, how do you say, big responsibility to put on a citizen.
Okay. All right. No, fair enough. Fair enough. At least you're honest to say you don't know what the expectations are. I'm also quite impressed that you've actually latched on to one particular entity that you'd like to work on after you've, you know, I would have imagined the world's your oyster after you finish your studies, but that's excellent. And I like the way you've sort of linked it up with whatever it is that you're studying over here. Nishaji, I know you're based in Europe right now. I know you've done a fair bit of, you know, studies and work around human rights, around democratization, and so on. What is it that you think Nepal expects of you?
I think that is a very difficult question, and I think there is no limitation that should be placed in one way, because as I was thinking about this question, it's like expectations change. So I think more than this changing expectations that I can't keep track of or do not quite necessarily agree to, I think about what it means to me, the country Nepal, and me being Nepali. And I think a huge part of my identity is derived from there. I am a strong believer that I am what I am because of Nepal. So I definitely plan on contributing towards it. But with that said, you know, yes, I plan to work there, but at the same time, the thing is, there are so many things that, okay, coming back to the idea of ownership, like in the context that if I identify as a Nepali, what are the problems that I have with the country? So even more than, you know, being more of a problem-centric person, I tend to try to be solution-centric. So my biggest concern in terms of gender studies and as my area of expertise, the way women are treated, the way LGBTQIA community in Nepal are not even addressed. These are major points of grievances. So I would say in the context of, should Nepal have an expectation of me? I would say yes, but would that expectation be in line with what they expect? I don't think so. I mean, I feel like with the patriarchal society that we have of Nepal, what their expectations they may have of me, I would not want to deliver because it's not based on my value system. However, at the same time, the things that are not right, the things that need to change, the thing that needs to develop, I'd very much want to go back and work on them. And for me, that means in the context of transitional justice and in the context of gender studies. That's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. All right, I like the way you skirted this issue of exactly, you know, what the expectations are and whether or not that's fair. Yeah, no, fair enough. But I said this is not the only conversation we hope to have, and we'll, you know, look forward to engaging in this one. But Susan, tell me from your perspective, from whatever you've seen, because I know you're working on your PhD right now, what is, in your opinion, the expectation that Nepal has of you?
नेपालकै एक्सपेक्टेसन त इट्स भेरी ब्रोड होइन. अब मबाट के एक्सपेक्ट गर्छ भनेर I can't say it, what does Nepal expect, but my expertise is in air pollution. I work on the air pollution mitigation measures and everything. अनि अहिलेको सिचुएसन हेर्दा चाहिँ काठमाडौँ भ्यालीको वा जति पनि तराई रिजनमा जुन एयर पोल्युसनको एकदम एक्सट्रिम इभेन्ट्सहरू भइरहेको छ, त्यसको लागि चाहिँ एक्सपेक्टेसन गर्छ भने चाहिँ आई थिङ्क आई एम विलिङ टु डु इट. अब my plan is to go back after my PhD and to work on especially on the emission mitigation policies, and especially to work with the Kathmandu metropolitan to mitigate it almost as much as I can. तर अब एक्ज्याक्टली यही एक्सपेक्ट गर्छ भन्ने त छैन, तर मैले आफूले जेनेरेट गरेको जति पनि नलेजहरू छ अहिलेसम्म पिएचडी गर्दाखेरि वा मास्टर्स ब्याचलर्स लेभलदेखिको जति पनि नलेज छ, आई वान्ट टु के भन्छ इम्प्लिमेन्ट एटलिस्ट 10% भए पनि आई वान्ट टु डु इट इन एयर पोल्युसन होइन, मिटिगेसन मेजर्सहरू यसको लागि चाहिँ आई वान्ट टु डु इट. तर but I don't know what they expect from me.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, there probably is a high expectation from you, Suzanne, only because you have a good education, you have a good background, you will have learned a few things, and therefore the hope is that when you go back, if you go back, and look, don't get me wrong, you don't have to go back to Nepal in order to contribute to Nepal. Okay, it would help, of course, but you don't have to do that. But I'm glad to hear that those of you that have responded to this have talked about and have thought through this particular issue. Tejanji has a really good point. Tejanji says, the question really should be, what would you like to do for Nepal? And what do you think matters the most? And fair enough. And the responses that have come have actually focused around what they want to do for Nepal. Sushant, tell me about your thoughts about whether you think there is an expectation of you from Nepal.
Well, I think as already mentioned by the rest of the panel, I think there are some expectations that you kind of work in the sector that you gain expertise in, because I think Nepal is currently in this developing phase. And I think Khagendraji started with the fact that we now have a demographic dividend, and we need to make use of it in order to make sure that we achieve the economic growth that's been targeted across developing countries. So personally, I'm already working in Nepal. So I'm contributing in my own ways through my own expertise in some of the projects related with government, and also one of the UK aid project here in Nepal. So I'm already playing my part, but I'd like to gain more education and possibly return back as an expert in Nepal, because I think knowing the context of Nepal and being here itself in the country makes a massive difference while you are designing public policy.
Yeah, good point. Akriji, when you do your work in terms of journalism and all that, do you come across this question from the youths about what is it that is expected of them?
Not so often, to be very honest.
Okay.
That question doesn't come up there. And it's also maybe because a lot of youths aren't experts, or they're not in the platforms. Like, I can interview them as characters, as people who've experienced, who've been on the brunt of these things, be it at the brunt of the fact that sanitary pads still have 13% tax, but then the people that I'll interview as experts are going to be older people, so not as much.
Okay, all right, fair enough. Rojnaji, what are your thoughts?
Would you like me to say like what expectation Nepal has from me, or would you like?
Please, by all means. Look, it's an open canvas. You feel free to sort of talk about issues that you want. But yeah, around the issue of what do you think Nepal expects of you, of the youth, and you in particular, and whether you think that's a fair expectation?
Actually, like, I've been getting this question a lot since I've been a national pageant title holder as a Miss Nepal Earth. So I have, like, people have a lot of expectation from me. Generally said, like, Nepal has a lot of expectation from me, like, these are the beauty queens and they need to do something for the country. But what I believe, like, yes, as an individual, not as a title holder or not as a public figure in Nepal, as a youth of a country, I have like a lot of responsibility to bring some positive changes in the country. And having said that, I second that what Ishaji has said, like, I want to become a solution centric. And since I study MBA in Thailand, I came back Nepal for a good, and now I'm working in a fintech company, that's Tamil Remit. I'm a part of something big that's coming up, which is gonna be a solution for most of our businesses in Nepal. So maybe that might be something interesting and positive change that I can be involved in, and I am involved in, which can be like, I can give back something to Nepal. So yeah, that's fair enough. That's absolutely fair expectation that Nepal can have from me.
Okay, that's okay. Valid point. I like the way you've sort of talked about it from that perspective. I hadn't really thought about it along those lines. There are 2 points that I've sort of picked up from the chat box area before I come to Ashish Ji and Avinash Ji about their own views. So one about needing to be conscious about the past histories and the role of the state and the way marginalized populations have been able to actually be able to say, this is this is what I would like to do. This is this is my role in society and in the community. And then Nalini's point about this issue being the issue of focusing on expectations, and her personal opinion that guilt is a very bad strategy in terms of looking at. A valid point. And look, Nalini, at some point, I hope to have a conversation with you about how I myself would have probably, looked at this particular point about whether or not there was any guilt in this. But Avinash, you're working in Nepal right now. Tell me a little bit about whether or not you see and you feel in your daily work, if there's an expectation of you as a youth, as an individual, and what is it that you will then be able to contribute to Nepal? Give me your thoughts.
Yes, sir. So first of all, like ideally, what Nepal should expect from us is like there should not be this brain drain thing. So like all this, like wherever like we are educated, like at least like and from anywhere, it should not be only from Nepal, but like from anywhere, like we should like involve in like making the work in the economic development of the country. So that's how like the country should ideally expect that there should not be like the brain drain, and then countries should be able to retain all these all these minds. And also as my colleagues also mentioned that currently the country have like this window of opportunity because of this demographic dividend, and then this opportunity is only until year 2035. After that there will be not like this window of opportunity available for us. So we have only 13 years left to like country has like 13 years left, so that like this country can get benefit from these people who are like less dependent and who are working. And from my side, like what I can do for my country is I've been working in education sector, and what I think is education is the only thing that can take people out of this poverty and then make the country economically prosperous. Otherwise, like if they like if people are not educated, then they go into a deadlock cycle of this this poverty, and then that keeps going, and then people are being like more poor. That's why like if we can, and then also on the education part, like currently our education system is not linked with the skill based education. So that's how like even the people are they have like a good degree, but like they cannot link their skills with the job market, and that's why like many people are also unemployed. So what I expect is like to have to provide quality education to the kids, and then so that like they can use their skills to make to help making country like socio and economically like more prosperous. So yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for bringing up this notion of and bringing education into the equation, because we sort of tend to sort of take it for granted that that you're born, you grow up, you get educated, you go abroad if it's possible, you get educated, and some of us continue to stay abroad, some of us return, and we do whatever we do. I'd like to go back to Ashish Ji now and sort of tie the threads together with respect to the role that the youths have in whatever can take place in Nepal, B, what Nepal expects of the youths, and in this particular, and we've heard from individuals in this particular session about this, but I'd also like you to touch, if we could please, on and this point that Tejanji had made about the need to understand the role of the state in the way in which that influences how individuals have certain viewpoints about their role in society, and again in some way it ties back to your point about should the person in Kailal be held accountable for what happens in the East. By that token, should somebody that has been sort of persecuted, has been marginalized in Nepal, how should she necessarily look at this perspective of what you contribute, what is expected of her, if you know what I mean? I think it's sort of I'm trying to seek your help in tying the pieces of the various things that we've talked about over here. Ashish, over to you. I know it's a difficult question, but maybe you'll help us bring it to some sense. Over to you.
I'll try my best. So I'll try my best. I think it's very natural for any state to expect from their citizen a Nepali person who have transferred into some other cities, and I think it's very natural. And the earlier government also brought some policies like brain gain, and if I am not mistaken, the oldest university, Tribhuvan University, also did some kind of thing that attracted a lot of intellectuals and experts from all around the world. I think it's very natural for them to do that. But the question is, can they provide ample opportunities? That's where I think we should discuss. Uh, if you are abroad and if you go to our embassy and talk with some staff in embassy, everyone would say, "Tamaiko skill ta hamlai pani chahincha haina, we need your skill in our country." But is state able to give ample opportunities to them as well? I think that's the more major area that we need to discuss. And how I look at it personally is, Nepal is not an isolated Nepal now. A lot of people have gone abroad. A lot of people have gone into good universities, and a lot of people have gone out for walk. I think there is a very good level of competition inside Nepal as well. So it's not only about expectation from your government or from your country, but it also about do you meet that criteria, the criteria that they need for you to work in back in Nepal. I think that is also something that we have to keep in our mind while we talk about expectations from our country, because the competition is really tough now. It's not so easy. And rather than talking about Nepal, I think we have to break Nepal into different pieces. I'm not sure whether it addresses your question about those spatial distribution that we talked about in earlier question. I think I think the private sector should come forward to bring scientists and experts back to country rather than the government, because if I think it would be more robust for them to reach out to the people in other part of the world. Rather than the government, because the government itself is bounded with some laws. They have to go through certain procedures. There are certain peoples that they have to that has to get convinced before making such kind of policies. So there might be personal interests as well. So it's better if private sectors could come forward and they look for the skills and the expertise that they need in their area of work, and maybe they can go out and bring people back to a country to work for them. I'm not sure whether this addresses the question that you were trying to raise or not, but that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you. No, we again, I know this point about public-private partnerships about the private sector had been raised before, and maybe we do need to spend a little bit more time on the scope that exists for bringing in the private sector. And yeah, no, I think it's a valid point. We'll see if we have some time to actually raise that. In the chat box, I've seen queries about whether or not there'll be an opportunity for the other individuals in the session to raise some questions. But let me, we hope to have some time for that. But let me then move on to the third question, keeping in mind the time that we have left. So this was organized by the NPI. The first time we're doing this, I know there are other entities that have actually done a substantial bit of trying to engage the youth in operational work and trying to get them doing work at the local level and so on, which is actually very, very exemplary. But in terms of where NPI comes to the picture, NPI is a fairly nascent organization. We've been in existence 3-4 years. We have grand ambitions of what we'd like to do, how we'd like to be viewed, and what contributions we can make to what's happening in Nepal, particularly in the public policy domain. So the question that we would raise to the groups before was your views on what you think NPI could do to help better engage the youths, so that we are better able to understand what is it that you have aspirations for, what is it that you think need to be done, and how we can then sort of make a contribution to that. Now, Avinashi, you are working with the NPI right now in some capacity. Where do you think, and feel free to dissociate disassociate yourself from NPI if you had, but wear a different hat. If you must, tell me a little bit about where you see NPI adding value to this particular issue of better engaging the youths.
Yeah, thank you for the question, sir. So basically, what I see is currently, there are like a lot of issues currently being faced by the youth population, and that's why also every day more than 1,500 people are migrating to different countries in search of for the job opportunity and for other things as well. But what I think is as an organization, as NPI is cannot connect all the youth, but what they can do is whatever problems are currently that we discussed now, and then there are so many problems currently being faced by the youth. So what NPI can do is basically can identify those problems and then gaps, and then if we can work on that, that will definitely later on help youths to country. That way youth can come to the country, or at least those brains can be used in the country, even if they are not in Nepal itself, but those their expertise, the youth wherever there are, their expertise can be used. I think that way we can use the young minds, and then also solve the problems that currently we're having. So basically finding the gaps and then trying to work on that.
Okay, thank you. I hope you're not wearing the NPI hat when you're responding to that particular question, but that's a very valid point. Nirupamaji, you are in the class of 2024. What would you like to see NPI playing a role as with respect to how you would like to then be involved in the kinds of things you've talked about?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I discussed with Colin Lizzie last time, and it was very nice to think that NPI is trying to connect people studying abroad with Nepal, with what's going on in Nepal. But yeah, but what NPI can do is that so I also talked with Korenji about this, but so there are 18 years people, no, I forgot the age, but very young girl, very young lady, she got appointed as ward chairperson. And I hope that if we are able to invite those people who are actually in the position of implementing public policy, it would be very great for NPI to do that, to invite these young people who are already in position and talk about about their roles and what they're doing. Yeah. Okay,
thank you. Well, NPI will hope to have some kind of a role as you sort of move on in your career, and as you try to do the kinds of things that you have expressed an interest in, and hopefully you'll be able to see NPI as a forum, as a platform, and indeed others that are operating in Nepal. Akriti, tell me a little bit about how you see the role that NPI may have.
I think one thing that I wish was there while I was doing my undergrad studies was that every opportunity that I had to write a paper, I would do it on Nepal, be it on any sort of laws, anything. Now, the problem was that I didn't have proper access to data. I didn't know what websites to go and search. And it's like this, the research that was producing out of Nepal, the journals, many a times I couldn't comprehend them well. So I think one would be allowing students, because I know there are a lot of students out there who still who are doing their research in Nepal as well, be it one research paper of 3,000 words. It could just be one semester paper. But even for that, because we want to do that sort of research and build our knowledge base, I think one would be us having this profound sort of library of data, quantitative, qualitative, for students who want to do this research. So that way, people who want to find more, they can come and try to access us, use us as knowledge hub, as NPI as knowledge hub. So I think that would be that would be a good sort of way to go about it. That's something that comes to my mind. Yeah.
Thank you. So that ties in actually with two things that NPI is sort of has targeted its work in, one along the lines of policy research and so on, but the other as a knowledge platform for exactly the kinds of things that you've talked about. And that's a really very valid point. And we'll certainly keep that in mind. Ishaji, tell me about what you see the role that NPI could play.
I think for me, it would be in two aspects. I say it as bridging the gap, be it in terms of like, taking the research into practicality, like has been brought forward, or in the sense of including youth in the sector. And the second one would be in exploring the intersectionalities, like even in the chat and the discussion that we've had today, we as the youth, we're touching on a lot of different things, and we're not seeing them as just one entity. We're looking at two different things. We're talking about complex issues that has a lot of intersectionalities. And unfortunately, that's something I haven't seen much in the policy space in Nepal. So I would really hope that NPI could do exactly just that, look into the intersectionalities, identify them, give them space, be it like Akriti said, as a place for information hub, or be it in terms of bringing a practical knowledge and allowing youths to find a way in making sure that all of the research experiences they've had is being translated into something. So I think in that way, NPI can play a very major role.
Okay, very relevant. Thank you. Susan, any thoughts from your side?
अब मेरो कुरा गर्दा चाहिँ जस्तो हरेक युनिभर्सिटी वा स्कुल नभनौँ, जस्तो ब्याचलर स्टडिज वा युनिभर्सिटिजमा चाहिँ हरेक डिपार्टमेन्टको आफ्नो आफ्नो स्टुडेन्ट ग्रुप हुन्छ, जस्तो एसोसिएसन हुन्छ। जस्तो म इन्भाइरोमेन्टल साइन्स काठमाडौँ युनिभर्सिटीमा पढ्दाखेरि चाहिँ एनएससिएस भन्ने इन्भाइरोमेन्टल अर्गनाइजेसन थियो। त्यसमा चाहिँ सबै ब्याचलर स्टुडेन्टहरूलाई चाहिँ इन्भल्भ गराउने थियो। हो त्यस्तो अर्गनाइजेसनहरूलाई चाहिँ एनपिआईसँग कनेक्ट गराउन सक्यो र जस्तो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल पोलिसिजहरू कस्तो इन्भाइरोमेन्टल पोलिसिजहरू चाहिँ नेपालमा छ र कुन चाहिँ कसरी इम्प्लिमेन्ट गर्न सकिन्छ भन्ने कुराको यस्तो टकहरू दिन सक्यो भने पनि एटलिस्ट वी क्यान मेक देम अवेर कि यस्तो पोलिसिजहरू चाहिँ छ। र अनि सिर्फ एउटा कस्तो भन्ने आफूलाई चाहिँ इन्भल्भ गराउने, जस्तो सानो सानो कुरामा आफूले चाहिँ जस्तो जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ कतै सब्जीहरू किन्न जाँदाखेरि चाहिँ आफ्नो पेपर ब्याग वा क्लोथ ब्याग बोक्ने, फोहोर बाहिर नफ्याँक्ने, यस्तो सानो सानो कुराहरूमा पनि हामीले चाहिँ इन्भल्भ गराउन सक्छ। र यस्तै मलाई चाहिँ जहाँसम्म लाग्छ सबै कुरा आफैबाट सुरु गर्नुपर्छ, अरूलाई दोष दिने भन्दा पनि आफैबाट सुरु गर्ने कुरा चाहिँ उनीहरूलाई अवेर गराउने, यस्तो गर्दाखेरि चाहिँ डिफ्रेन्ट इस्युजहरू चाहिँ इन्भाइरोमेन्टल इस्युजहरू चाहिँ कम हुन सक्छ भन्ने कुराहरू चाहिँ त्यसरी पनि हामीले इन्भल्भ गराउन सक्छौँ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई चाहिँ। र अनि हामीसँग चाहिँ अब्रोडमा बस्ने धेरैजना एक्सपर्टिजहरू डिफ्रेन्ट फिल्डमा हुनुहुन्छ र हामीले चाहिँ इभन करियर टकहरू जस्तो पनि दिन सक्छौँ कि यो सब्जेक्ट लिँदाखेरि चाहिँ यस्तो हुनसक्छ, यस्तो अपर्च्युनिटीहरू छ भन्ने कुरा पनि गराउन सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई चाहिँ एनपिआईको थ्रुबाट।
Thank you. Yeah, valid points. Good. Susanji, any thoughts from your side?
Yeah, I think I agree with what all the speakers said about it, but I would like to probably second the point that Nirupamaji made about the fact that I think we need to get more people who already have the positions in these discussions. As the discussions ma ल्यायो भने चाहिँ अनि रिसर्चर्सहरूले गरेको रिसर्चदेखि लिएर हामीले रेज गरेको इस्युजहरूको पोलिसी ब्रिफिङ पनि अलिकति इम्प्याक्टफुल हुन्छ कि जस्तो लाग्छ। So yeah, bringing in more people who actually have policy making roles in the government or could be in the private sector. So I think that's something NPI could look forward to.
Rosnazi, how about you?
All of the speakers have already told, like bridging gap, identifying all those loopholes and everything, but adding on to it, I feel like some youth communities like Nepali Youth Council getting involved with UNDP youth strategy can make it a better way for NPI to get engaged with youths of Nepal and also youths of Nepal who have been studying outside, like just what हाम्रो अरू स्पिकरले भन्नुभएको जस्तै हाम्रो अरू स्कुल्सहरूमा पनि एउटा ग्रुपहरू हुन्छ। म एआइटीमा हुँदा नि हाम्रो नेपाली ग्रुपहरू थियो। We know the policy, but we also do not know the policy. So making like giving knowledge about what policies do we have, keep getting updated. I think त्यो कुरालाई चाहिँ NPI can do a better job. And what I feel like also we have a members of NPI from different parts of the world. Maybe what we can see on those parts, what policies they have, discussing them with the youths of Nepal can pave paths for a better future.
Okay, it was very, thank you, Rajinaji. I sort of waited until the end to ask this question of Ashishji, and I know Ashishji, you've been involved with PRI, and so in a way, in a very along the lines that NPI itself is involved in, and you've seen things from different perspectives. Tell me where you see NPI adding to this. And I mean, is it along the lines of what PRI is doing? Is there scope to do something else? Fill us in a little bit about how you see this particular issue.
I think in terms PRI was a bit state-centric. You can look at PRI from different perspectives. It can also be said that PRI is manufactured, by the state to tell the people what the state want to tell them. So NPI stands a bit different, I think, especially after I came to know that there are people from all around the world. So I think we have to look at it from different perspectives. And I'd be a bit peculiar, and something that that connotes well with both PRI, NPI, and every other institutions would be I would be a bit blunt here. I think that's incentive, and incentive. If you give good incentive, you'll get good people. If I would like to share something with you all. After NPI launched this youth volunteer, they called for paper, right, from youth around the world, and there was some amount of money that NPI was giving to provide them, and I shared it with my students. And one of my students who was not eligible, he wrote me back that I would have loved to done that because the money was really good. That's what struck to my mind when I saw your third question. So bluntly speaking, I think incentive would be the first thing. And with incentive, I'm not trying to talk about only those tangible monetary incentives, but the people should they should feel that they are learning something and it will help them to prosper themselves in their career. So, and the second thing, affiliation with universities. That's what our fellow friends have already said. And I think a third area that we could think a bit, concentrate a bit, would be affiliation with young entrepreneurs. And a lot of startups are going on right now. A lot of people are trying that. They don't like to work. They just like to invent something new. So I think that would be a good area to explore, to engage with youth, because some of my colleagues that they teach entrepreneurship and management in management colleges have told me that the research base is quite weak, although the startups, the number of startups are going up, but the base of the research is quite it's not so strong. So I think NPI could plunge in that area, maybe explore something in that area as well. Thank you, sir.
Great, thank you. And in the chat box again, you can see lots of sort of points being made about how it is that there are different avenues that the youths can follow in order to and indeed for NPI to sort of be involved in doing these kinds of things. Okay, look, I'm mindful of time again. It's we've been at this for 90 minutes now. One of the questions that had been raised in the chat box was about the possibility of others in the group being able to ask questions, because so far we've only been focusing on the 3 points that we've raised. Boyzi, you wanted to say a few things, so go ahead. I'll leave the floor to you.
Oh, thank you. First of all, thank you so much for letting me speak, right? And I loved hearing everybody else. I was just going to say something. It might be useful, it might not be, but about what suggestions for NPI there might be. I don't know. I'm probably not qualified enough to make a suggestion. But one thing that came to my mind when, was that maybe NPI as an organization, we could have different, small gamuts of like, I don't know, committees, subcommittees in that sense, some for depending on issues, how universities have departments in that sense, and somehow like that would make a really cohesive organizations. Like, for example, what happens is I'm involved here in like STEM departmental policy committee. So it just works on diversity and stuff. But in that
Sorry,
case,
where exactly are you located?
oh, I see. I'm in Ohio right now, in Columbus,
Okay.
Ohio.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, the Ohio State University. I apologize. Thank you. Yeah. And somehow if we could form, slightly interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary subcommittees, that would really bring us, that would really use us very efficiently. But that's one of the suggestions I had. And another one I just wanted to say about, the question that you asked about reciprocity of expectations between us and our country. And I really like the point where, we should not be pressured by expectation or some comment like that in the chat. On the other hand, I mean, we certainly want to give back to our country, right? Obviously, that's all of us desire to do so, but there also has to be, somehow I feel like our personal ambitions also need to be balanced in, at least in some proportion, by our country too, Otherwise it becomes really hard. We are human beings. We want to take care of a family. We also have our personal aspirations and stuff. Probably everybody else knows this too, right? So probably I'm speaking to the choir right now. But somehow if there could be a good negotiation between personal aspiration as well as contributing to the country, as far as what country expects from us and what we expect from country, that would bring a whole lot of people, rather than expecting people to make a huge sacrifice. 10% of people might do that, but a larger section of population probably won't do it, right?
Okay, all right. No, fair enough. There's a valid point. That, yeah, we shouldn't really forget that the youth also do have their own, personal aspirations. Maybe you have things that you really like to do that have nothing to do with, what you see as what the country expects of you. I was just sort of raising that point out there because as I was watching the particular video of Barack Obama speaking to these youths in Mumbai, it sort of got me thinking about what exactly indeed does the country expect of its youth. Okay, look, I really don't want colleagues in Asia and Southeast Asia to sort of stay much longer than what they've already done. It's about 1:30 in the morning over there that Kaganji has been up. So Kaganji, I'd like you to sort of give us your thoughts about whatever you've heard so far before I then summarize everything and then talk about what happens next. So Kaganji, over to you briefly on your views and perceptions of what you've heard so far.
Thank you, Gambhirji. म यो summary अलि म लाउजी पनि भएको छु स्क्रिनमा धेरै भएर होला अर्ली मर्निङदेखि मैले चाहिँ वास्तवमा अघि सुरुमा भन्दा पनि तीनटा कुरा चाहिँ हामीले यसको अब्जेक्टिभको रूपमा हेरेको छ भनेर भन्न खोजेको थिएँ म त्यसलाई फेरि मैले अहिले तपाईहरु सबैको कुरा सुन्दाखेरि एउटा ग्लोबल कम्युनिटीको कुरामा बनाउनु पर्छ भन्ने हामीले सोचेको कुरा तपाईहरुको सुन्दाखेरि यो लेजिटिमेट नै थिंकिङ रहेछ यो थिंकिङ चाहिँ लेजिटिमेट जस्तो लाग्यो अनि दोस्रो कुरा चाहिँ मैले ओपनिङकै टाइममा भनेको थिएँ यो के रे अब प्रोफेसनल एस एक्सपर्टहरुलाई चाहिँ गभर्नमेन्टले पनि यताउता गर्ने एंगेज गर्ने टाइपको सोचहरु भए पनि यङ स्कलरहरुलाई कसरी एंगेज गर्ने जो स्टुडेन्ट स्टाटसमा छन् नेपाल सरकारको गैर आवासीय नेपालीको परिभाषामा पनि समेटिदैन अनि उहाँहरुको चाहिँ प्लेटफर्म छैन ग्लोबली अहिलेसम्म त्यो ग्याप चाहिँ हामीले फिल गर्न खोजेको एनपीआई ले त्यो आइडियाबाट हामी इन्स्पायर्ड थियौं तपाईहरु सबैको कुरा सुन्दा आई थिंक वी आर मुभिङ इन द राइट डाइरेक्सन अनि अर्को दोस्रो कुरा यो पोलिसीलाई हेर्ने कुरा चाहिँ हामीले युथको स्पेस अघि त्यो अनरशिपको कुराहरु आयो अनि त्यसलाई हेर्ने पनि जस्तो अघि एकजना प्यानलिस्टले भन्नु भएको थियो आफ्नो भ्यालु सिस्टम हुन्छ युथहरुको आफ्नै भ्यालु सिस्टम हुन्छ त्यो थिंकिङ हुन्छ पर्सपेक्टिभ हुन्छ त्यो कुराहरुलाई ल्याउनलाई हामीले युथ एंगेज गर्यौं भने हामीले कम्तिमा एनपीआई ले पोलिसी अल्टरनेटिभ रिकमेन्ड गर्दा पनि के रे युथहरु एंगेज गरेर गर्यौं भने हामीले दिएको अल्टरनेटिभमा पनि त्यो पर्सपेक्टिभहरु चाहिँ मल्टी एंगल पर्सपेक्टिभहरु चाहिँ के रे इन्क्लुड गर्न सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्यो त्यो कुराहरू हाम्रो थट्स चाहिँ त्यसलाई अझ रिफाइन गर्नुपर्छ, त्यसलाई अझ डेभलप गर्न सकिन्छ जस्तो लाग्यो। अनि तेस्रो कुरा चाहिँ आजको हाम्रो प्रोग्रामको अब्जेक्टिभ पनि भनेको थियौँ मैले सुरुमा पनि कम्प्लिमेन्टरी प्लेटफर्म कसरी बनाउन सकिन्छ होला एनपिआईलाई, त्यो चाहिँ तपाईँहरूको युथहरूको बेसिकली भन्न खोजेको आफ्नो करियरमा पनि, र यदि नेपालले के खोज्छ भन्ने कुरामा चाहिँ म पनि त्यति साह्रो अब्सेस छैन। हामी के दिन चाहन्छौँ भन्ने कुरा हो। यो अहिलेको ग्लोबलाइज वर्ल्डमा हामी ग्लोबल सिटिजनहरू पनि हो, अब ग्लोबल नेपालीज पनि हो हामी। त्यसले गर्दा हामीले नेपाललाई के दिने, अब हामीले कुनै न कुनै के अरे स्पेस, कुनै न कुनै जियोग्राफीमा त हाम्रो नलेज वर्कहरू कनेक्टेडै हुन्छ। अब मेक्सिको हुने ठाउँमा नेपाललाई हामीले फिल्ड बनाउन सकिएला, अथवा के अरे अरू कुनै इन्डोनेसिया गर्ने ठाउँमा नेपाल जहाँ चोइस हुन्छ हाम्रो त्यहाँ नेपाल चुज गर्न सकिएला। त्यसले गर्दा त्यो कुरामा पनि मेरो इनिसियल थटसँग चाहिँ यहाँहरूको कुराहरू मिल्यो जस्तो लाग्यो मलाई। यसको मतलब के भने हामी जहाँ छौँ त्यहाँबाट नेपाललाई कन्ट्रिब्युट गर्न सकिन्छ। त्यसका लागि मैले त भनेछु, मैले त यो एनपिआईको फर्स्ट इभेन्टमा हामीले स्ट्राटेजिक प्लान पहिलो 2018 मा काठमाडौँमा अनभेल गर्दा पनि भनेको थिएँ। यो 90s मै चाइनाले चाहिँ पहिला चाहिँ के छ 1950 तिर चाहिँ चाइनाले चाइनिजहरू चाइना फर्क अनि चाइनाको विकास गरौँ भन्थ्यो। 90 तिर पुग्दाखेरि चाइनाले चाहिँ अब जहाँ छ त्यहीँबाट सहयोग गर भन्ने पोलिसी ल्याएको थियो। अब हामीले त फर्किने, हामी बाहिर गएका नेपाली ब्रेन ड्रेन भयौँ र फेरि फर्केर आएर गेन गर्ने भन्ने त कन्सेप्ट नै अहिले इरेलेभेन्ट भइसक्यो मेरो बुझाइमा, जुन आज तपाईँहरूले भन्दाखेरि हाम्रो बुझाइ उस्तै रहेछ जस्तो लाग्यो। त्यसले गर्दा यिनी तीनटा कुराहरूमा चाहिँ आजको हाम्रो एउटा छलफलले एउटा दियो होला जस्तो लाग्यो। अनि बेसिकली गम्भीरजी मैले केही छुटेको भए तपाईँले थप्नु होला। अनि अरू कुरा चाहिँ ब्रिलियन्ट आइडिया, म त सबै कुराहरू सुनेर इट इज भेरी एजुकेसनल टु मी पर्सनल्ली। अनि र अब यो एउटा चाहिँ जस्तो तपाईँहरूको एकाडेमिक, मैले त्यो शब्द पनि भनेको थिएँ, एकाडेमिक आफ्नो ड्रिम र करियर ड्रिम पर्स्यु गर्ने सिलसिलामा एनपिआई कहाँ हेल्प हुन सक्ने एउटा युजफुल प्लेटफर्म बनोस् भन्ने पनि मैले भनेको थिएँ। आखिर तपाईँहरूको पनि अहिले पेपर गर्दा पनि अप्ठ्यारो हुन्छ। उदाहरणकै लागि आकृतिजीले एउटा रिसर्च पेपर गरिरहनु भएको थियो अन्डर ग्रेडकै, त्यो बेला आकृतिजी मेरो भेट भएको होइन। आकृतिजी उहाँले मलाई गर्नु भएको थियो, कसरी हुन्छ भन्दाखेरि हामी त्यही सिलसिलामा चिनेको। वास्तवमा यो त्यसै गरी बिल्ड हुने कम्युनिटी जस्तो लाग्छ मलाई। त्यो गर्यो भने चाहिँ हामी अलिक ग्राउन्डेड हुन्छौँ जस्तो पनि लाग्छ। र अब हामीसँग एक्सपर्टहरू, हामी मिड करियरका अब हामीहरू जस्ता पनि छौँ, र यङ रिसर्चहरू हामी मिल्यो भने यो एउटा इन्टरजेनेरेसनल पर्सपेक्टिभ पनि हुन्छ। हामीले त्यो कम्प्लिमेन्टारिटी पनि देखाउन सक्छौँ, गर्न सक्छौँ होला जस्तो लाग्छ। मैले चाहिँ आजको यसबाट यही देखाएको छु। र ब्रिलियन्ट प्रेजेन्टेसन अल 5 प्यानलिस्ट। I mean, we all have to appreciate your contribution. Actually, this is also a contribution, huge contribution that we can plan further. अनि मेरो एउटा अनुरोध चाहिँ एनपिआई को चेयरको पनि एउटा हैसियतको हिसाबले आउने यो डायलग्सहरूलाई चाहिँ तपाईँहरूले अब फेरि नेतृत्व लिदिनुहोस्। अघि एकजना साथीले भन्नुभएको थियो हामी यस्ता थीमेटिक टिमहरू पनि बनाउँदैछौँ, युथको पनि त्यसको अब यो डायलगलाई लाँदाखेरि अब नेक्स्ट डायलगमा चाहिँ अब म चाहिँ यो रोल लिन्छु, यसरी गरौँ भन्ने तपाईँहरूको आइडिया पनि आओस् अनि हामी यसलाई चाहिँ कन्टिन्यू अगाडि लान चाहन्छौँ। I think that's all, Gambirji, from my side. You can add and then sum up.
Thank you, Kangji. Yeah, no, great. Look, I don't want to keep all of you guys waiting. Certainly for those of you that are in Asia, this has been very educational for me as well. We've always been, at least I myself, I've always been talking to people that have similar views, similar age, similar sort of, always talking to the people that are singing from the same hymn sheet, as it were. And it's just wonderful to hear different thoughts about how you see what's happening in Nepal, or indeed in general. I like Akritiji's point that she's made in the chat box about sometimes it's easier to actually stay abroad and get things done, where there are different enabling conditions and enabling in a scenario that allow you to actually do more. And so it's not necessarily true that you have to be in Nepal or in any particular country in order to be able to contribute to that. And there are examples of that galore all around. Let me thank in person and in particular our 8 panelists. Srijanaji, thank you so much. Ashishji, Avinashji, Susanji, Akrishji, Nirupamaji, Ishaji, and Reginaji. Thank you. You've stayed up. You've actually shared your ideas. I'm sorry we didn't have much time to go through the intricate details of everything that you did want to say. We do hope to come back to you individually as well as collectively. This is not the first such conversation. We would like to have this on an ongoing basis and make sure that NPI does provide you the platform that you're seeking in order to actually A, work on policy research areas if that's what you want to do, B, as a knowledge platform of something that you think you can benefit from, and C, again, as a collaborative environment where we think about issues, we discuss ideas, we come up with our own views and see how we can take them forward. This particular session has been recorded. You will, in the near future, we will have a proceedings of this particular session that will be up on NPI's website. So feel free to come and visit that and sort of gain from what is it that we've discussed. And what we'd like to do then is, again, take individual strands of the discussion that we've had. And please don't be surprised if I do come back to you individually and say, could we talk about this particular point? And then it'd be wonderful to hear your thoughts about how you see we can take this work forward. So thank you again very much. Thanks for staying up late. And for those of you that are in the US, the day is just begun for you, presumably early afternoon. This just begun for me here in New Zealand. And Happy New Year, and we'll be in touch again. Thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate that. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
एउटा फोटो गम्भीरजी एउटा
I thought we'd already done that. Avinashi, am I right? Or
Yes,
you
sir.
would like to take one more?
सबैले क्यामेरा खोलेर एउटा फोटो चाहिँ हाम्रो यो इनागुरल भएकोले एकचोटा स्क्रिनशट लिने कि
मैले फेरि पनि एकचोटि क्यामेरा अन गरेर पनि एकचोटि लिन सकिन्छ।
मिल्नेसम्म क्यामेरा अन गरिदिनु भयो भने एउटा स्क्रिनशट पवनजी
Great. Thank you so much, Avinash.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you so much.